Okay, so think about this for a second. Imagine having a kind of power, a power that doesn't require you to say a single word.
Mm.
Just, an influence that comes from simply not always being there, like
What?
stepping back.
Right. Choosing silence.
Yeah, choosing silence and just watching how things shift around you because people notice, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. They notice. They might wonder what's up.
They might even try and pull you back into the old dynamic. So just thinking personally now, what do you think would happen if you weren't always, you know, immediately jumping to respond?
It's interesting, isn't it? If you held back that instant reaction,
What shifts might you see? Just creating a bit of space.
well, our consistent reactions, they almost become like instructions for other people.
Instructions? How
Well,
so?
they learn what to expect from you.
How? Right.
And they can start to maybe unconsciously navigate based on those expectations. So this idea of withdrawing you mentioned, it really shakes up that learned pattern.
Exactly. And that's really what we're getting into today, the impact of just not being so readily available, emotionally, mentally, even just, physically around all the time.
Hmm.
Our source material suggests this can really stir things up. Sometimes it even creates what feels like a crisis for the people around you.
Right, that crisis of unavailability.
Yeah. And it makes me think of that Jung quote. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves.
That's such a powerful one.
It feels like how we react when someone becomes less available. Well, it says a lot, doesn't it? Not just about them, but maybe more about us.
Yeah, if we actually look at that irritation, it can be like a mirror, can't it?
Yeah.
Reflecting our own stuff back at us.
How so? Like what kind of stuff?
Well, maybe their frustration or our frustration when someone pulls back, maybe it highlights where we've been, I don't know, overly eager to please.
Yeah. Or too quick to react.
Exactly. Or perhaps we were seeking their approval more than we even realized. It's not just about the external relationship dynamics. It's a chance for some real self-reflection.
Right. So today we're going to dig into why some people might react so strongly when you're suddenly not as accessible.
Yeah, what's behind that intense reaction?
And we'll explore how those reactions can maybe reveal some uncomfortable truths about manipulation. Maybe even subtle ways we've been letting ourselves be controlled.
And what that all means for our own energy, our own well-being.
Totally. So the aim today, really, for you listening, is to grasp the power of unavailability, not as some sort of game,
No, not at all. It's deeper than that.
but as a genuine path towards, well, greater self-awareness and, importantly, protecting your own mental and emotional space, your energy.
Okay, so let's dive into that crisis of unavailability idea a bit more. Our sources point out something key. People often get used to controlling us, or at least the interaction, through our predictable responses.
Okay. So our availability becomes this known thing, this reliable factor for them.
Exactly. It's a known quantity. So when you step back, when you withdraw that availability, you're essentially taking away the buttons they're used to pushing.
Right. You basically changed the rules of the game without even announcing it.
Mm.
They were comfortable knowing how you'd react, what would get a response, maybe what would trigger you.
Yeah, they had a playbook.
But when you choose silence or just create some distance, suddenly, poof, you're an unknown again.
And that sense of control they felt, maybe unconsciously, it starts to evaporate.
And that's where the feeling of crisis might come in for them.
Precisely. And this whole situation can really shine a light on the underlying dynamics in those relationships, can't it?
How so?
Well, the material suggests that when you become less accessible, the reactions you get, maybe they start trying harder to reach you. Maybe they show irritation. Maybe they even try to provoke you. Those reactions can really expose any manipulative tendencies that might have been lurking under the surface. What are your thoughts on that?
It's almost like a stress test for the relationship, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
When you stop playing the expected role, the real nature of the connection, or at least their motivation within it, kind of bubbles up.
Right. If their go-to reaction is suddenly trying to make you feel guilty for pulling back.
Or they suddenly get super attentive after you create distance, but weren't before.
Exactly. It tells you a lot about what was really driving their engagement with you.
And it loops back to that Jung quote again, doesn't it? Their irritation might actually be showing me where I was, perhaps, too easily pulled into their drama or too quick to need their nod of approval.
Precisely. Their reaction can highlight your previous overavailability and how that might have, unintentionally fed into their patterns of behavior.
Okay, so that makes sense. But let's flip it. What about the cost to us? The cost of being constantly available.
Yeah.
The sources definitely touch on the energy drain.
Oh, it's huge. They talk about how every forced yes, every immediate response, every emotional reaction just chips away at your energy reserves.
And it feels so true. That constant effort, trying to please people, smooth things over, avoid rocking the boat.
Especially with people who maybe aren't truly invested in your well-being anyway.
Right. It's just exhausting. You end up feeling so drained sometimes with this like inexplicable emptiness, and you can't even quite pinpoint why.
And if we think about just basic self-care, that kind of ongoing energy depletion, it's just not sustainable.
Not at all.
It leaves you feeling vulnerable, less resilient, and maybe less able to be truly present in the relationships that do actually matter and nourish you.
So the key takeaway there isn't about like becoming a hermit or abandoning everyone.
No, not about isolation.
It's about consciously choosing where you invest that precious energy.
Exactly. Which leads to what our sources call the prison of availability.
The prison of availability. Okay, tell me more.
Well, we're often taught, aren't we, that being accessible, being reliable is a virtue, a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. It's seen as being dependable.
But it can so easily morph into a trap. You become so predictable that you're almost like a tool for others.
Tool. Ouch.
Or like an emotional emergency button they can push whenever they need a quick fix or some validation or just someone to vent to.
Right. They know you'll pick up, you'll listen, you'll soothe them.
But it challenges that unspoken assumption, doesn't it? That if you're always available for them, they'll automatically be there for you in return.
Yeah, the material makes a strong point that that's often just not how it works out.
In fact, your very predictability can lead to you being taken for granted.
It's like you become so reliable, so always there that your presence, your input, it starts to lose its significance somehow.
It's like that old saying, familiarity breeds contempt, or at least maybe just breeds a lack of appreciation.
Yeah. And this is where Jung's idea of the persona seems really relevant. That mask we wear.
The social mask we put on for acceptance.
Yeah. The sources link that directly to being overly available. What do you make of that connection?
I think it's a really powerful link. That persona, that drive to be liked and accepted, it fuels so many of those moments, doesn't it?
Like saying, it's okay when actually you're drowning.
Exactly. Or those instant text replies even when you're completely running on empty.
Or that constant explaining and justifying why you did or didn't do something.
It all comes from that underlying desire, often unconscious, to be accepted, to fit in, to avoid rejection at all costs.
It's like we're performing this role, the always available, always agreeable person, hoping it'll earn us love or connection or security. But the sources argue, and this really hit me, that being available all the time is a subtle form of self-abandonment.
Wow. Self-abandonment. That's strong.
Yeah. It's putting everyone else's perceived needs, or maybe just their comfort, ahead of your own genuine limits and well-being, over and over again.
And the long-term cost of that kind of self-neglect, well,
Yeah.
it's that constant energy drain we talked about, treating your energy like it's this infinite well, when actually it's very much finite.
Which brings us to this slightly counterintuitive point the material makes, the devaluation of the abundant.
Right. This is fascinating. The idea that the more available you are.
The less value others might actually place on you.
Exactly. What is always there can become emotionally insignificant. If your time, your energy, your support is just always on tap.
It stops being seen as something precious, something to be earned or respected.
That seems to be the argument. It kind of loses its perceived value.
Which really pushes the listener to ask a tough question. Who truly deserves your time, your full attention, your presence?
And just as importantly, the flip side. Who might actually benefit, and maybe the relationship might benefit, from you creating a bit more distance, a bit more absence.
Yeah, and it's not about being mean or spiteful.
No, it's about discernment. It's about recognizing your own worth and allocating your resources wisely.
Which leads nicely into this concept of psychic energy. Another Jungian idea our sources explore.
Psychic energy. Think of it as the fundamental driving force behind our thoughts, our emotions, our actions.
Okay, like our mental and emotional fuel.
Exactly, a limited resource. And the sources argue that Impulsive reactions are a major drain on this energy.
Impulsive reactions like snapping back immediately.
Or getting sucked into pointless arguments, or feeling compelled to defend yourself against every little criticism, even ones that don't really matter.
Oh, the mental replay loop, going over and over conversations in your head for hours.
Yes, that's a perfect example. The material flags these as ways we essentially waste this vital psychic energy.
Just letting it leak out without any conscious direction.
And it brings up that really powerful Jungian principle. That which you resist persists.
Meaning?
The more you react automatically, impulsively, the more you actually become tied to the very thing you're reacting against. You give it power over you.
Ah, okay. So you're feeding it with your energy by reacting.
Precisely. And the sources suggest that a lot of emotional exhaustion stems directly from this misdirection of energy.
Constantly reacting instead of consciously responding.
Yeah. And when you're feeling depleted, energetically speaking, the material points out, you become much more vulnerable to manipulation.
Why is that?
Because your judgment might be clouded, you're more easily swayed, you're less able to clearly see the difference between a genuine connection and someone, well, taking advantage of your fatigue or your ingrained need to please.
Okay, so that's the problem. How do we start to change this pattern then? How do we conserve this energy?
Well, the sources talk about protecting your inner system, and a huge part of that is learning how and when to say no.
Mm-hmm. The power of no.
And also knowing when to simply be silent, to observe before jumping in.
So not feeling like you have to have an immediate opinion or solution for everything.
Exactly. True power, the sources suggest, isn't about reacting loudest or fastest. It's about consciously choosing when and how to engage based on your own self-awareness, your own values.
What resonates with you most about that idea? Choosing when and how to act.
For me, it feels incredibly empowering. It's that shift you mentioned, from being purely reactive, bounced around by external stuff.
To being more proactive.
More deliberate.
Yes. Proactive, making conscious choices about where your energy actually goes. The sources also encourage us to really notice our triggers.
What sets off those automatic reactions?
Yeah. What situations or people consistently drain our energy? Because those are key areas for growth. The goal isn't indifference or detachment.
It's not about not caring.
No. It's about selective engagement, investing your energy wisely.
Okay. And being selective like that, being less available, it apparently disrupts projections too, another Jung thing.
Yes, projection. This is a big one. The sources explain that people often project their own unacknowledged qualities, good or bad, onto others.
Like seeing something in someone else that's actually in them.
Kind of. And the more available and accommodating you are, the easier it is for you to become a sort of blank screen for these projections.
Can you give an example? Sure. Think about the friend who always casts you as the strong one, the one who has it all together, maybe because they don't want to deal with their own vulnerability.
Or the partner who constantly needs rescuing, maybe projecting their own need for competence onto you.
Exactly. Or even praise that feels conditional, praising you only when you fit the role they need you to play.
Right. And the sources suggest these relationships might be built largely on that role you've slipped into.
Maybe without even realizing it. Perhaps driven by an underlying fear of rejection or abandonment if you don't play that part.
Okay. Which brings us to manipulation again, but maybe the quieter kind. The sources talk about silent manipulation operating through guilt.
It's often subtle. Manipulators, consciously or not, often rely on your predictable reactions. They count on that ingrained feeling you might have.
That feeling of obligation, needing to always be there, always fix things, always understand.
Yes, even when it's costing you dearly.
So what happens when you break that pattern, when you stop reacting predictably?
Well, that's where the power shift happens. The material really emphasizes this. Saying no, choosing silence instead of jumping to explain, withdrawing your energy. These actions fundamentally disrupt the manipulative dance. Because the masks, the roles they projected onto you, and perhaps the mask they wear themselves in the interactions, they can start to slip. The script goes out the window.
And that's unsettling for them, I imagine.
Deeply unsettling, often, because suddenly they don't quite know how to relate to you anymore. The old buttons don't work.
They can't rely on the usual outcome.
Right. And they might be forced, maybe for the first time, to actually look at themselves, at their own part in the dynamic. Which, as the sources point out, can be incredibly uncomfortable for people.
So your unavailability becomes this kind of threat.
A threat, or at least a challenge, to those who are using you perhaps as an escape from their own issues, or as a convenient mirror that only reflected back what they wanted to see.
Okay. This leads us into the power of silence itself, not just not reacting, but actual silence.
Yes. And the sources make a distinction here. It's not about passive, sulky silence. It's about a conscious, strategic, insightful silence.
Conscious silence. What did Jung say about this?
He apparently viewed silence as this incredibly fertile ground for inner transformation.
Fertile ground. Interesting.
Yeah, a space where you can step back, observe your own patterns, observe the dynamics around you, and gain real clarity, real lucidity.
And that clarity, that lucidity can feel threatening to others.
It can, especially to those who rely on confusion or emotional reactions to maintain control. When you're silent and observing, you're no longer feeding their narrative. You're changing the fundamental rules of engagement.
You're taking back control of the narrative in a way.
Exactly. The sources frame true silence not just as the absence of words, but as a form of mastery over your own energy, a refusal to be dragged into negativity or unproductive drama. And this connects directly to Jung's idea of individuation, that process of becoming a whole integrated self. He believed it requires a certain amount of distancing, stepping away from the noise to actually hear your own inner voice.
But let's be real, this kind of intentional silence, this unavailability, it can have social consequences.
Oh, absolutely. The sources acknowledge that. It might lead to distance, especially for more superficial connections.
People might misunderstand you, think you're being cold or arrogant or standoffish.
For sure. But the sources suggest reframing those reactions. They often come from people who primarily valued your utility, what you could do for them, more than your actual authentic self.
Ouch. That's a tough pill to swallow, but probably true in some cases.
It really becomes a matter of priorities. The sources suggest that maturity involves becoming more selective with your words, seeing them as investments of your energy.
So silence isn't necessarily a retreat in a weak sense.
No, it's reframed as a form of self-sovereignty. It's the stance of someone who no longer feels that constant, nagging need to prove themselves or explain themselves to everyone.
And that kind of silence, the kind that's about your own inner state, not aimed at the other person.
That's the most powerful kind, according to the sources. It's the silence that rebuilds you from within.
Rebuilds you. How?
By connecting you to something deeper than just external validation. It allows you to reclaim that vital energy we talked about, to reconnect with your own core.
Okay, so this all seems great conceptually, but how do we actually do it? The sources say understanding isn't enough.
Right. It takes emotional discipline. It takes actively practicing conscious unavailability.
Conscious unavailability. What does that look like, practically speaking, day to day?
The sources define it pretty clearly.
Yeah.
No longer being accessible to everyone at any time for any reason.
Wow, okay. That sounds radical almost.
It is, compared to how many of us operate. It's about taking deliberate control of your energy, your time, your peace.
So give me some small, concrete examples. What actions could someone take?
Okay, simple things. Not feeling obligated to text back immediately, taking a pause, a breath, before reacting to something provocative.
Choosing to leave a discussion that's just going in circles or feels draining.
Turning off your phone sometimes without feeling guilty about it.
And the big one, saying no. Simply saying no without feeling you need to write a 5-paragraph essay justifying it.
Exactly. That justification piece is huge, isn't it?
Yeah.
The sources really emphasize you don't owe everyone a detailed explanation for your absence or your silence.
That feels incredibly freeing, just saying it. But also challenging. It cuts against so much social conditioning.
Totally. Because when you stop the constant explaining, you take away that leverage others might have used to keep you in that comfortable, predictable box.
The box of the always helpful, always understanding person.
And this ties into another Jungian idea, sacred isolation.
Sacred isolation sounds intense.
It's not about locking yourself away forever. It's about that necessary inner retreat, part of individuation, where you step back from the noise to really listen to your own voice.
To rebuild your sense of self from the inside out, not based on how others see you or what they expect from you.
Precisely. And the sources offer some useful indicators or thermometers for growth here.
Like what? How do you know if it's working?
Notice who distances themselves when you start setting boundaries. Notice who tries harder to provoke a reaction out of you.
Notice who accuses you of changing, often not in a good way in their eyes.
Exactly. These reactions, while maybe uncomfortable, can actually be signs you're making progress. You're disrupting unhealthy patterns.
It's crucial, though, isn't it, to acknowledge the initial discomfort that comes with this?
Oh, yeah. The guilt can be intense. feeling selfish even.
Especially if you've spent years being the go-to person.
Right. The sources frame this as part of the deconditioning process. It's natural for choosing yourself to feel unfamiliar, even wrong at first if you haven't done it much.
But ultimately, this conscious unavailability, it's positioned as the bedrock of self-determination, isn't it?
Yes. Saying no to the constant external demands, they argue, is fundamentally about saying yes to yourself, to your own needs, your own boundaries, your own peace.
But the sources are also realistic. They acknowledge that setting these boundaries, becoming less available, it can lead to ruptures.
Yeah, relationships might change or even end. And that can bring real pain, loneliness, maybe a sense of estrangement.
It's not always easy. There can be loss involved.
Definitely. But the sources reframe that potential loss as ultimately freeing yourself, creating space.
Space for what, though?
Space for kind of rebirth, perhaps. A chance to become more whole, more self-reliant, less dependent on those external dynamics.
Which connects to this idea they mention, the loneliness of the strong.
Describe that a bit.
Well, they talk about that initial silence after you pull back, how it might feel empty or uncomfortable at first.
Right. The absence can feel loud initially.
But then, gradually, it transforms into something else. Something cleansing, calming, a different kind of solitude.
Okay, so it's contrasting that uncomfortable loneliness
Yeah.
with maybe the solitude of total presence.
Exactly. The solitude of someone who is fully present with themselves because they're no longer constantly betraying their own needs to keep others happy or comfortable.
And in that space, what emerges?
Clarity, peace, a deeper sense of inner strength, resilience.
Again, the sources loop back to Jung here, reminding us that he saw individuation as inherently requiring some separation, some stepping away from the collective thinking, walking your own path for a time.
It's like a necessary part of the journey to becoming truly yourself.
So the ultimate shift, the big picture outcome here, according to the sources, is moving from reactor to creator.
Okay, unpack that. From reactor.
From someone constantly responding to external events, pressures,
a
demands,
creator.
to someone who actively shapes their reality, their experiences, from a place of inner alignment and conscious choice.
And those people who get uncomfortable with your newfound unavailability.
The sources suggest they likely only valued the role you played for them, not necessarily the authentic you that's emerging.
And releasing those connections, while maybe sad or difficult.
Can be incredibly liberating in the long run. It frees up so much energy.
And paradoxically, the sources conclude this unavailability, this conscious withdrawal, actually leads to you becoming more valuable in a genuine sense. More authentic.
More rare, perhaps, and ultimately more unforgettable because you're operating from your true self.
It's framed as a kind of rebirth, a new chapter.
Yeah, the start of a life where you're no longer settling for less than you deserve, where you only accept relationships and interactions that genuinely resonate with your peace, your truth, your wholeness.
So it really comes down to a choice, doesn't it? For anyone listening. Are you willing to maybe embrace some temporary discomfort, maybe being misunderstood for a while?
In exchange for that deeper inner freedom, that sense of sovereignty.
Are you ready to embrace the authentic you, even if it means some people fall away or don't approve? It's a big question.
It is something to really sit with.
Maybe take a moment, reflect on that. Are you ready, truly, to choose your own peace?
This deep dive, like always, it's just scratching the surface, really. There's so much more to explore here.
Absolutely. But hopefully it sparks some important thoughts, some insights for you on your own journey towards self-discovery, empowerment, and maybe, just maybe, reclaiming some energy through choosing consciously how and when you engage with the world around you.